Hi, I'm Mark Raven, and welcome to the most dramatic episode ever on My Favorite Mistake. My guest today is Zach Waddell. He is a customer success manager at Wolf. They are the first global collegiate higher education institution that allows membership for qualified new colleges through their software platform. So we'll talk a little bit about that business and other entrepreneurial ventures from Zach's career. But the other thing I'll mention is you may know from the way I introduced this episode, first off, episode 97, Anthony Trucks, who was my guest, he had previously been a contestant on American Ninja Warrior. Zach Waddell, joining us today, was a contestant on a show that might be even more grueling. That show is The Bachelorette. So Zach, sorry for the tortured introduction there. How are you?
Oh, hey, not a torture at all. That was fun. Well done. Bravo.
My wife is a huge fan of the show, so I've picked up some of the lingo and some of that along the way.
Yeah, a lot of it feels like climbing a warped wall, just like Ninja Warrior. So, yeah, good analogy.
I hope you didn't come away with too many bruises.
No, yeah, it was, it's an interesting experience kind of being thrown to the fire and seeing how you come out forged or unforged. It's a good exercise in kind of creating your own narrative and controlling your own narrative throughout the show. So, I came out okay. Others didn't, but I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, we'll come back to that later on, because I think in terms of the question we normally start with, I think your story is something not related to that. Thinking about rocky ups and downs and challenges and entrepreneurship. So let me get back to the question at hand, Zach. The different things you've done. What would you say is your favorite mistake?
Yeah, it's funny. So a little bit of circuitous way to answer this, but when I thought back on the favorite mistake, I thought about a story my grandfather used to tell me. He talks about his father coming from Croatia to the New World and three brothers. And anyway, two of the brothers, including my great grandfather, got on the boat to Ellis Island, but the other brother somehow didn't make the trip. Years later, they hear from him by whatever method they do, but he had ended up on the wrong boat and ended up in Chile carrying the rootstock from their family vineyard in Croatia.
Oh.
From my grandfather's point of view, this was always a story of foreboding, be on time, be responsible. But, we find out years later that there's this other lost Chilean individual. He started a successful vineyard, and to this day, it's one of the higher end boutique vineyards in Chile.
Yeah.
So for me, it flipped this on its head. Someone that either by mistake or by design got on the wrong ship and ended up having a really great the mistake turned into a really great opportunity.
And that happens sometimes. We can be thankful for that when it does.
But for me, coming back to my story, I had a kind of a long transition, falling in love with ideas. And in the entrepreneurial space, learning that the idea really means nothing. It's all about the execution.
Mm.
And the way in which you execute is, that true iterative approach, going out, listening to the customers. And even though that was kind of built in the game plan for me, surrounding yourself with other founders that think the same way is so important. And, that was my kind of big mistake.
So you're saying so maybe first off, if you can give the example of the story you're thinking of here, what the idea was, what the company was, it'd be good to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think at the time, I come from an entrepreneurial background. My father was an entrepreneur, various degrees of successes and failures, as most entrepreneurs have. But I was in a position working for a large Fortune 500, Fortune 2000 company that was going under, and the ship was sinking. And, a lot of us were coming up with ideas of what's next. The markets weren't great. The job opportunities weren't great. And I had some ideas I've been working on for a while to start something new. Now, the people I were voicing these ideas to were people I worked with as an organization. They were all failing with the ship, falling with the ship, and they said, "Let's do this." So my first, unpacking that big mistake was not really vetting those individuals. It was mostly out of necessity that we came together, and we didn't really have time to take a breath and to say, "Is this the right group?"
Mm. Yeah. What I mean, say, were they the right individuals because they had certain functional or technical skills? Or are you kind of
Yeah.
thinking
So
about vetting in terms of like shared values or approach to entrepreneurship?
I think that's it. When you're the one that's been mulling over these ideas and building them for months and even years in this case, all that you've put into it comes across as, hey, this sounds exciting, but the ideas that were the backbone of it, for me, it were things like distributed leadership, new ways of approaching management in a way that wasn't as hierarchical.
Mm.
That was a big part of it. And, I had put together not hundreds, but large governance docs that, nobody really took the time to read or understand.
Yeah.
And that was also my fault in the execution of not like, hey, foregrounding this, let's all read this together and make sure we understand it, right?
Sure.
The company itself was in flat fee real estate. So there were very few companies at the time, and they were mostly very regionally located. My idea was to, start a flat fee commission real estate company that was based on your social network, people that you potentially know or trust to do the real estate transaction for a set flat fee. We all know that cousins and aunts and uncles, a lot of them have a real estate license or just aren't using it. And if you can find someone to, do the transaction for $3,000-4,000, everybody comes out ahead.
Yeah. And so that's certainly appealing compared to paying 6%, which is pretty standard. It's interesting how industries have these sort of just, standard fees. And I mean, it sounds, was it appealing to both sides of the transaction? Like what assumptions let me ask it this way. What assumptions did you have to test to see if that would fly?
Yeah, good question. Of course it appeals to anyone, right? The disparity between the 6% and the flat fee not only is a lot easier to palate, but also when it comes down to the brass tacks of it all, it's difficult. What I wasn't really factoring in was the difficulty of moving realtors that are full-time realtors away from that model, no matter if there's a personal relationship involved or not.
Yeah.
And I realized pretty quickly that the way to test this was to go out and become a realtor myself, go out and start using my own network to test. The disparity that was with the other founders was not everybody wanted to go out and do that, and that's where it started to break apart.
Yeah. And so then what kind of cycles of learning were there then at least for you going out and putting that license to use, trying to test this model?
Yeah. It was easy to tell a story. And it was easy people to buy in and understand the idea, but it was a lot more difficult breaking from the patterns of behavior within the real estate market. Also within the regulatory framework, I mean, there's some states that didn't even allow this to happen. So that was a big barrier that I had kind of scratched the surface on in my research, but not fully dived into it. And that's when it became apparent how difficult it was going to be to break the tradition.
Yeah. So then, I'm curious, when you start seeing barriers like this, some of them very entrenched, very systemic, was there a thought process of trying to find a way to pivot or pulling the plug and saying, well, we tried, we learned some things, there's no shame in that, life goes on? Like, how do you weigh some of that decision then?
Yeah, really good question. For me, having kind of fallen in love with the idea of what I wanted the business to be. It was something that I found meaning in doing or bust. So the pivot idea, which is where it turned, was something that I wasn't as interested in being a part of. And that's when I kind of made the departure. The company, to my knowledge, is still around.
Okay.
I think they're doing some sort of like reverse mortgage type of thing, which is, not the direction I originally wanted it to go. But yeah, those pivots are essential if you're in it for the long run. For me, it was more motivated for mission,
Yeah.
and that's where I departed.
Yeah. So then I'd like to come back then. You talk about some of the people dynamic of did you have a team that was aligned with your view of how you wanted the company to be managed? So for one, if you could just kind of talk a little bit more about your thoughts and inspiration around being less hierarchical, like what influences you had on that and what you would have wanted to see in the company had it kind of gone the way you would have hoped.
Yeah. I mean, I can think back at the time I was reading a lot of the Zappos stuff, the Inspiro group out of New Zealand. I was deep into that and saw the path towards a better way, but only in the way the stories were being told, not in the execution of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I tried to put together, like I said, my own sort of governance docs that were informed by what I was reading, but I never really had those powwows with others, members of the leadership team, to say, hey, let's make this work.
Yeah.
Let's understand it together. Let's riff on it a little bit. It was just like, hey, is this sitting in my folder in my Google Drive somewhere?
Yeah.
And I'm silently trying to manage by it.
Yeah. But I mean, is it fair to say, like, of all the things a startup is trying to do or figure out, how do we prioritize? Are we finding product market fit? Are we having to adjust? What experiments are we doing? Are we developing whatever platform you were maybe developing? I mean, I could see where like stopping to talk about culture might sometimes feel like a luxury.
Yeah.
Or not top priority for the others.
Yeah, I think so. And to be fair, it probably wasn't at the time. And when I talk about the mistake, I think that was one of my big mistakes, is like trying to push that agenda too early. And at the end of the day, when I think back, I mean, was I in love with like starting a company or just starting a company that looked like this? And I think that was it. It was this vision of like what coming out of a large corporate hierarchical structure. Hey, here's an alternative, and I want to make an alternative come to life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in some of my own career path, I mean, I've, kind of vacillated or swung back and forth like a pendulum. It's possible to, I mean, I've made mistakes of sort of over adjusting sometimes, of like leaving big corporate life to go to a startup and then tiring of the problems that came from that. And I probably made a mistake in like swinging back to corporate life again.
Yeah.
A mistake I will probably not repeat again. And I'm sure I'm unhirable at this point, but I mean, maybe we can transition to talking about, Zach, what you've seen in terms of lessons learned of future ventures, or even of being applied to what you're doing through Wolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was an eye-opening experience for me to understand the need for good mentorship and leadership, and being around someone that was a lot smarter than I was, that was a lot more grounded than I was, that was about execution and could execute in ways I couldn't before. And yeah, it's just been so great to kind of take a back seat to these dreams of becoming a lead and just saying, I'm happy being second fiddle to people that are way smarter than me, and then I can fit in a place, do my job well, but still be a part of an entrepreneurial venture that's actually going somewhere.
Yeah. So what stage was Wolf at when you joined? Would you say they had already found product market fit in this definition of their platform for different colleges and universities?
Yeah, it was on the second or third iteration of product market fit, not to the way we've seen success recently, but I was probably in the first 10 employees that they started to slowly grow to where we're 50 or 60 now.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, at that point, it was coming off of an early stage, like building a license or a portfolio of accreditation licenses globally.
Mhm.
And as that portfolio started to build, it was about finding the right customers, colleges that wanted to start using those licenses. When I started, there were less than, let's see, probably less than 10 colleges, and we're at close to 30 now. And these colleges that we have now are substantially larger than when I started off. So it's been a good ride.
Yeah. And then are there opportunities in your role as a customer success manager to, at least practice in different ways? These principles around iteration and learning and I don't, some people would say failing forward. It's not my favorite phrase. I don't know why it came to mind, but like how do you, are there ways to apply it now in the type of role that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, because this field of accreditation management and accredited learning outside the scope of a traditional university setting, brick and mortar, I should say,
Mhm.
is so new. I think we're all willing to make those small mistakes, fail quickly, learn collaboratively, and throw egos out the window in a way that doesn't exist in the traditional pathways.
Mhm.
And that part's really great. When you sit with a new college founder that has had a lot of success, maybe at a university, is branching off on their own, starting a college,
Mhm.
provides extremely high quality education,
Mhm.
but needs to find a venue to do that. And this new college setting is just really exciting. So yeah, I mean, finding where the students are is a process that changes every day. So
Yeah. Well, I'm, not knowing the market that you're serving and working with, it's a little surprising to hear of new colleges and colleges being started. It seems like you hear more often of struggles of older, smaller schools. I'm just kind of curious what your perspectives are in terms of, startups, I guess, in a way, a startup college and the challenges they're facing. And the question I was going to ask them was just a little bit about Wolf. How, if somebody's starting a college, and what services are they getting from Wolf that they might not have to build independently?
yeah. So as an example, I mean, you can think of a large boot camp maybe in India that has thousands of students signing on every single month that are providing kind of cutting edge education in ways that traditional universities aren't, in coding, but specifically in coding in areas that are employable, right? All of the latest coding languages are taught to in kind of real time as they're emerging,
Mhm.
with high quality instructors that are coming out of some of the top Indian universities. This isn't if they're going to go the traditional path of getting this accredited learning inside a university, the licensing process will take years.
Mm.
But because we're able to move, so swiftly and nimbly outside of that environment, yeah, I mean, we can spin up these new colleges with these same high quality professors, add some elements of like peer reviewed literature and all that's required in a real academic setting, and come out with the same ECTS accredited degrees that students are getting coming out of Oxford or University of London. I mean, the same
Yeah.
qualifications. But just do it. The accreditation part is just much faster and much
Mm.
more.
So it's not even okay. That's interesting. It's not a matter of just outsourcing certain functions. It's really more of a time to market
Time to
advantage.
market. And yeah, I mean, these colleges could go down the route, I assume, or I know of, filing for their own accreditation, right?
Yeah.
But again, that process takes many years on their own, and it requires an individual, a number of individuals, a whole team and department, right, at a high head count. In our circuit, we essentially take over that responsibility and say, hey, here's our licenses and our portfolio. Use what you can teach to. and then grow your business as you see fit without worrying about the accreditation piece.